everybody's doing great today. We're going to get going in a couple of minutes. I've got my friend Kara here today. We're going to be demoing some moves. I'll be right back. I'm going to go get a clock.
A clock?
Always one thing I forget.
Just to keep track of my time.
Always easier doing it this way. I hope everybody's doing great today and that you can hear me. Maybe give me a yes, I can hear you on the screen if you can or cannot. That would be great. Let's see if there's some people, and depending upon where you're from in the world, maybe give me a little, let me know where you guys are from. Yes, I can hear you. Thanks, Eileen. Thank you very much. Excellent. We'll get going here in just a couple of minutes. Today, for sure, you're going to need the melt full roller, but for some of the demonstrations that we're going to do, I also want to show you some of the techniques using the half roller and sort of build upon what we did last week. Those of you guys who missed last week's session, I was talking about people with pelvic pain, and that can come by way of sacroiliac pain, abdominal pain, pubic pain, so a pubic symphysis that is shifted in the front, the SI joint shifting in the back, people with prolapse, incontinence, back pain, somebody said prostatitis, colorectal issues. It doesn't matter. If you don't feel stable in your pelvis, it can wreak havoc on every aspect of your health. So we really talked about the concepts of differentiation last week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but we're going to add on to this one of the integral moves of melt, and it's moving towards neurostrength, is a core technique called the core challenge. And I really want to break that one down for you guys today and use Kara as a demo so you can really see what it is. I also want to review a move called side leg lift, which we did last week, and give you another strategy to just sort of work through that technique. Last week I did it with my heel up against a wall. Today we're going to just use the strategy of using a roller to really learn about the stacking, because I had some questions about that stack. People couldn't figure that out. And there's another move that I want to cover today if we have time, which is a sideline arm fan, because Kara's got some issues with her shoulder and had trouble doing this when we were together. So we're going to see if I guide her into the right position and give you guys kind of that breakdown, if it helps you to understand and learn how to do that technique as well. So I am going to be using a resistant band, so if you have one of our resistant bands, great. You could use the heavier gauge one, but we're going to use the light gauge because, again, Kara's got some issues with her shoulder in general. So we're going to get going in about 60 seconds. I just want to see what if any questions have already come up. And I know a lot of you guys are melters, and so if you have questions in general, let me know, and I will definitely, see if I can address some of this as well. But definitely what you will need today, no matter what, is a melt roller. Okay, so we are at 4 o'clock. So welcome everybody. I'm Sue Hisman. I'm the creator of the Melt Method. I'm here with my friend Kara Thorson, who is also an Iyengar instructor. And today we want to break down and create some precision of some of the very nuanced techniques of melt. And because we are actually going to be practicing it, we're going to demo it, and then I'm going to invite you guys to come up and do it with us. I want to do a little bit of hydration ahead of time. Make sure that your body is nice and juicy before we go ahead and tinker with the core activation of our torso. So just again, today we're going to be primarily working with the full roller, and we want to break down moves like core challenge. We're going to look at the side leg lift, which was one of the moves that I did last week, and to really perfect the concept of pelvic stacking. That's one of the real tricks of that move, is stabilizing your pelvis. Lots of us have done side leg lifts. Jane Fonda did many of them over her career. We've all seen a side leg lift, but our side leg lift in melt is quite nuanced, and these are all part of neurostrength. What is neurostrength? Neurological reintegration and repatterning techniques. This is about the stabilization aspects of your shoulder girdle and your pelvis. And what most of us don't realize is that from the repetitive postures of sitting or the repetition of our movements, we can actually become very inhibited in our deep stabilization mechanisms of the shoulder girdle and pelvis. We don't know that it's happening. It has nothing to do with how strong you are. You could, bench press 200 pounds and still be neurologically inhibited or have sensory motor weakness and tone, if you will, in the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle stabilizers. So the whole game of neurostrength is focusing on what's staying stable the moment before you move, to try to reintegrate those stabilizers to fire properly first, to hold the positions that we're holding, so that as we execute the movement, we start to create new neural feedback and we can reinstate stability in those regions of our body. Great for people who have any type of shoulder or pelvic pain. So, because again, we are going to be doing some of these trickier moves, I'm going to have you guys go ahead and lie on your back, palms faced up, arms and legs extended. And I want you to use your body sense, and we're just going to see where your body is at before we try to tinker with anything. And that's always kind of how we start any type of melt nap. So if you lie on your back, palms are faced up, arms and legs extended, just begin to breathe in. Notice how your body expands on the inhalation, and then as you exhale, notice how your body returns back to midline. And begin to use your body sense. I want you to scan your body for accumulative stress. And the way that we do this is by keying into what we call masses and spaces. So start to tune into the areas of your body you feel are in contact with the floor. Those are your masses. And then begin to drift your mind away from what's weighted to the ground and start noticing what regions of your body are off the ground. We're going to call those spaces. And in your upper body, I want you to tune into your head, arm, and torso position. When we have stuck stress living in our shoulder girdle, it's going to alter the balance of the upper body masses. So ideally, your head feels like it's weighted behind the bridge of your nose. And if you use your body sense, so don't fidget or adjust, notice the back of your hands, up your arms. Ideally, your arms feel evenly weighted to the ground. Notice if you're feeling like one arm actually has more mass weight to the ground, or maybe you're feeling more space under one wrist. And in the upper body, I want you to notice where you feel the most weight of your torso. When we have a lot of accumulative stress, you're going to feel most or all of your back weight's way up on the shoulder blades. You might actually feel the edges of your shoulder blades are digging into the ground. But when you use your body sense and you scan the mid ribs, which is just below your shoulder blades, where the ribs should be most weighted, it'll actually feel very lifted in the mid-rib wall. So notice if you're kind of feeling the arch of your back feels like it's very tipped up, very high. It's not in the lumbar spine, it's in the thoracic spine. We could also take the moment to turn our head left and right and just notice if we have limited range to either side or pain to turn our head. Or if we feel like our shoulders follow our head turn, just notice those things. Okay, again, when connective tissue is kind of restricted in our bones moving, you're just going to kind of feel the body doesn't have fluidity to it. So now go back and take another breath in, and on your exhale, just begin to notice your lower body masses, and notice if you have any tension in your thighs. See if you can relax any muscles that are just not necessary for you to rest. I want you to tune into your low back curve. Remember, if you're feeling a high tensional lift in the mid back, you might also feel like the tension in your low back is tight. You might actually feel tension and lift in the mid and low back. And in the lower body, if you've got a lot of accumulative stress altering what we call NeuroCore efficiency, you'll feel like you're lying on your tailbone rather than two evenly weighted butt cheeks, and the back of your thigh masses may feel more like spaces off the ground. You might notice that your calf masses are unevenly weighted, and without looking at your feet, what angle do your feet externally rotate? Ideally, they rotate like a letter V, northeast, northwest. But notice if you're kind of keying into your toes pointed very away from your ankles, or very, very turned out to the sides of the room where the sides of your feet are touching the ground. Just try to notice where your body is at before we go ahead and try to adjust. And then finally, accumulative stress in our connective tissue can actually alter our own autonomic stability. So if you divide yourself into a left and a right half, just kind of use your body sense. Scan your right side and your left side. If it feels to you like one entire side of your body is more weighted to the ground, or one leg feels longer than the other, notice that, because if our autopilot doesn't have a clear connection to our center of gravity, it'll leave us feeling offset to one side, or we just won't feel balanced. So just try to remember where you find tension. If you felt, again, all your back weight's on the shoulder blades, high tensional lift in the mid-back, tailbone on the ground,
or back of thigh off the floor. Those are the four most common imbalances. Notice if you have any of those. And then go ahead and bend your knees. We're gonna roll on our side. We're gonna come on up to sitting. And we're gonna grab onto our roller. And I'm actually gonna give Kara the large one. I'm gonna use the performance roller. And, sorry, hang on a minute. And we're gonna do a little seated compression work. So I'm gonna have you guys sit up atop your roller and put your hands in front of your body, and you're just gonna start to glide right over your sit bones. And something I always mention, you know, when you're at home, like right now, Kara and I have our spandex pants on. Cute outfit, by the way. But when you're at home, you know, having bare skin against the roller will always help you in these techniques. Okay, so right now I'm going over my sit bones, right? So where I want to get on it is my pelvis. I actually want to get on my SI joint and my tail triangle, your sacrum. So if you start to move your body forward and then take your right hand and drop it behind you, and if you have the full roller, I want your thumb to look like it's at the edge of the roller, so your fingers are pointing outward. And then once you're here, you're going to tuck your pelvis. So you're curling, and then you're reaching the other arm out just as wide so that your thumbs are pointed towards your roller. And if I asked you right here to just think about your ribs sinking down, and if I said, hey, your hands are light, you should feel that your abdomen engages a little bit. Can you find that? Mm-hmm. So pubic bone is curled to the nose. And once you have that, you're just going to nice and slowly begin to glide the back of your pelvis. And what I want you to really gain a sense of is that your pubic bone is always energized towards your nose. So really keeping the elbows nice and soft, keeping your weight on the pelvis and not in the arms, but using your core to activate that stability of your core so that we're keeping the pelvis nice and neutral here. So now bring your feet together, tip your knees over to the side, and I want you to glide over the sacrum, but now you're on what's called the SI joint, your sacroiliac joint. And as you go over the SI joint, just notice, is there any tenderness over here? Just notice it, make a note. And then come back through the midline. And then same thing, tipping your knees over to the other side. You might notice that one side is tender, one side is not. I really want you to kind of key into that. And then coming back to the center, same thing, you're gonna glide. Awesome. And then just pause here for a second. I want you to take your front elbow, you're going to drop it down, and you're going to turn yourself onto your side. And where we want to glide is on the side hip, because today I want to refine your technique of a move called side leg lift. And I did this one last week, and I'm going to really work on the stacking. So right here, where we are gliding, this is the side hip. These are the internal hip rotators. And if you feel like this is uncomfortable, you can always open up your feet. Sometimes having our feet wider makes it easier to glide. This is where we ideally are going to feel our side leg lift. These are the muscles that we're going to try to activate with our subtle movements today. Okay, so find a spot if you feel like there's a tender area, just kind of get smaller, sort of nuzzle up against it. And that leg that you're on, just go ahead and clam that leg slowly in and out. So if I compress muscles and I contract and release them, that can create an indirect shear. It's actually creating a fluid exchange around the area I'm compressing. I could also straighten out my leg, and I could roll my body in the direction of the roller, kind of pinning the skin, and almost as I turn, kind of feeling like the skin is sort of twisting as I'm going forward and back. Or I could kind of lean into it, pin the skin, and I could shift my body forward and back. So I'm not rubbing my skin up against the roller or my pants up against the roller, pinning the skin and sort of creating a twisting action in the underlying substances between my skin layer and my bones. I'm gonna pause there, nice focused breath. And then same thing, you're just going to curl yourself up. We're just going to tip ourselves over to the other side. Same thing, forearm is down to the ground, and you're just going to start to glide. So as you guys are going through this motion, remember you could even open up your feet a little bit if that's easier for you. You could bring your hand onto your thigh. Sometimes that helps people to navigate. But really move around, leaning a little forward as you glide, leaning a little back as you glide. Explore the whole side hip. And then again, if you find an area that's tender, don't keep breaking over it. Kind of get a little smaller and smaller, sort of nuzzle up against the top or back side of it. And then you're going to go for that clamming motion, just opening the knee, dropping it to the ground, and bringing it back up. So again, if I contract muscles against a compressive interface, that's a shear force. I'm compressing and moving tissue. Or I could straighten out my leg, I could keep my pressure constant, and I could kind of roll my body, sort of pinning the skin and rolling over it and rolling back. Or again, I could just kind of lean into it a little bit. I could even put my top hand down to the ground, and I could create a twisting action, sort of shifting the hips forward and back. And on Melt on Demand, you'll find lots of variations on this one. So same thing, we're gonna pause here for a second. Nice breath in and out. And then come on off the roller. Okay, so we got a little hydration into the pelvis, and we are gonna work on core. So I'm gonna have Kara lie on her back here, and she's gonna bend her knees, lift up her hips, and we're gonna bring this roller underneath the back of her pelvis. Okay, now where is the right place on the roller? If you were to put your own hands on the top of your hip bones and run your hands behind, you should not hit the roller. So I really want to find this nice sweet spot of the back of the pelvis so that even the front of my hip crease would be on top of the roller. Really important that we have the wide surface of the back of the pelvis, not the low back, not too far down. So another way you can tell you have the roller in the right place, if Kara brings her knees into her chest, and she folds her knees all the way in, roller's not going to go anywhere. It's nice in that firm surface of the back of her pelvis. Now, we did a little bit of gliding over the SI joint, so now we're going to shear it. So all I need you to do is take your knees, if you were on a face of a clock, from a 12 o'clock, just tip it over to 1 o'clock or to 11 o'clock. Don't go to 12 and 2 or 10 and 2, just a slight bit of an angle. And to refine this one today, I want you to tip your knees towards me. And you're going to pause here. So right now, Kara's on her right SI joint. And if I ask Kara to just sort of feel like she's going to energize her left knee up just a touch, it's actually going to weight that SI joint. Can you get a sense of that? So once we're here, we're just going to kind of keep that. We're just going to create these small circles. So that's a shear, right? We're pinning the tissues right around where that SI joint is. We're just creating a subtle bit of motion. Now, we could also stay on that lean, keeping that left knee sort of energized up, and with the right leg, we could just start to make small circles. And just remember, if you feel any clicking, cracking, popping, snapping, thunking, crunching, any audible sounds, you're moving too big, you're going too fast, just slow down, or you can even reverse your motion, right? And if you say, oh no, that way I feel a click, well then that's not the way you want to go, right? So just kind of practice which way works for you. And if both of them are tough for you, the other one to do is a marching action. And actually this subtle movement that we're making at the hip joint is part of core challenge. So really feel how you're moving from the hip, from the crease of the hip, rather than moving from your low back or from the knees. And then we're just going to stay on that angle and we're just going to pause there, taking a nice focused breath, meaning taking a breath right into what we're compressing. And then we're going to tip our knees over to the left side. And once we're here, I want you to, again, just think it's an idea more than a thing. Just kind of energizing that right knee up a little bit. It's just going to land the weight right to the SI joint. And then same thing, you can either create small circles with both of your legs. Or again, you could keep that right knee kind of energized up and that left leg is going to come into circles. And I kind of always think of this as being like one of those swirly lollipops where you start small and then you can get bigger and bigger. But again, you want to control the motion. And again, if that's tough for you to go that way, try going into a reverse circle. It doesn't matter which way you go, but here we have an indirect shear. You're actually moving the hip joint, not the SI joint. But if I bring the legs together, and again, we slowly march the legs, here's a indirect and direct, both at the same time, because you're moving the hip joint, and this action will also move the elia against the SI. And then same thing, we're just going to pause here for a second, nice breath in, and then we're going to come on back to the center. Okay, so for a moment, set your feet on down to the ground, and I want your heels to kind of feel like they're right under your knees. And one of the moves that we have to do before we were to do a core challenge is called tuck and tilt challenge. So before we do a tuck and tilt challenge, let's make sure that we understand pelvic motion. So this is a modified tuck and tilt challenge. So what is a tuck? Kara's going to curl her pubic bone toward her nose. And the first thing I want you to do is just hang out here and check that you haven't flattened your cervical spine to the ground. Kind of think about your neck staying open, the center of the back of the head staying relaxed. And in a tuck, all you need to do is focus on where you feel your ribs are right now. And I want you to focus on what's going to stay stable, right? So think neurostrength here already. So mid-ribs are going to stay where they are. As Kara starts to untuck her pelvis, she's just going to try to focus on keeping her ribs in the same spot. And she's going to do it again. So she's going to tuck her pelvis, and she's going to tilt her pelvis. Now the range of motion is not the important point here. It actually ideally is fairly small, because I'm going to have Kara do it wrong for a second. So if she tucks, which she does great, but now if she tilts and she goes too far, you see how those ribs come on up. So if I say, hey, Kara, keep your pelvis here, but now sink your ribs back down, right? Her body's going to equate it. So it's your range of motion. It's not science's definition today. This is where you are, tucking and tilting. So when you tuck, just think of this. When we tuck, the pubic bone curls toward the nose. And when we tilt, it's almost like an undertow of water coming over the spine and sort of drawing the sacrum back toward the calves here. So one more time, you can carry your exhale as you tuck, taking a little sip of air, and then exhaling and tilting, okay? So that is the movement of the pelvis. Now what we're gonna do is add an integral muscle of stabilization called psoas. This is one of these communication gateways between our diaphragm and our pelvis, which really helps the brain find our center of gravity. So Kara's gonna go ahead and bring her legs back up where we had it when we did our SI joint shear. And she's gonna place her hands on her thighs, and she's just gonna start to run her hands down her thighs until her fingertips kind of almost practically poke over the knees. And you can see how she's kind of kept her legs in this relative 90 degrees. Her heels are slack to the butt cheeks, right? So there's no tabletop in this. Don't use your quadriceps. This is going to be really tough for those of you who do a lot of Pilates. We get very quadricep bound. We're going to try to keep these relaxed. Now, here's the cue first. Take a breath in. And on an exhale, nothing's going to happen except Kara's going to try to find her core with her SH, SC, or HA sound. So I'm going to have her do it. And when you force an exhalation, that is going to trigger an effect to release the diaphragm more quickly, but what you should feel is a cylindrical engagement throughout the abdomen. She's going to hold that exhale. There's that nice core engagement, and she's going to take her breath in. She's going to do it one more time. She's going to make that SH, SC, or HA sound. Okay, so that is a core reflex. That's the cylinder, so it's actually wrapping around her torso. So, now, I want you to take a breath in, no exhale for a second, just press your thighs into your hands. When we press our thighs into our hands, there's no action that you saw, but what you should feel is there's an engagement in the abdomen. That's psoas, that's not rectus abdominis, it's not these big muscles. So we're gonna keep that thigh pressure toward the hands. She's gonna take a breath in, and on her exhale, she's gonna find her core as she presses her thighs into her hands. Give me that exhale.
Oh, you want that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, she can do it without it. She's going to keep that exhale going, and as she does, I'm going to ask her to tuck her pelvis. And as she's going to pause with her pelvis tucked, we'll see it. Tucking. Beautiful. And she's going to take a breath in, keeping her thighs pressing into her hands. She's going to untuck her pelvis and land the pelvis back to the top of the roller. Now, you don't have to keep making the SH sound. Kara's going to do it now by just thinking about her exhale. She's going to take a breath in. On the exhale, she's going to tuck her pelvis, so it's almost like the thighs are levitating up to the sky in the tuck. She's taking another breath in, and on an exhale, she's sinking her pelvis back down. And I'm going to really over-exaggerate this one, so hopefully you can see it this time. She's going to take a breath in. On an exhale, she's going to tuck. She's going to take another breath in, and on the exhale, she's going to tilt. Beautiful. She's going to do it one more time on her own. She's going to tuck. Thighs are still pressing into the hands. And then on the exhale, she's going to tilt. Almost like thinking my thighs are spinning inward on my tilting. Okay, so now listen. We're keeping this tilt a core challenge. What is it? Kara's going to take her right hand. She's going to cross it over her left hand. So now, the only thing that's being pressurized is her left side. So this is left psoas in what's called a static contraction. So we just have this isometric hold here. She's going to take her breath in. And on an exhale, we're going to let this leg start to float down. And what we're doing is we're opening up the front of the hip, but her knee is also opening. Watch how that's kind of slightly opening up. Okay, so now what have we done? We've elongated in an eccentric contraction her right psoas. She's going to take a breath in. On an exhale, she's going to press her thigh into her hand. As she exhales, she's keeping the tilt. And now we're going to just kind of slide that hip joint back into the socket, all the way back up, bring it home. She's going to do it on the opposite side. So again, right side right here. She's got an isometric or a held contraction in psoas. She's going to take a breath in. On an exhale, we're just going to let this leg start to travel down. So she's really thinking, opening up the front of the hip, lesser trochanter, right in the inner part of the thighs where psoas holds. We're going to take a breath in. There's that eccentric, now we're going concentric. She's going to exhale, and again, it's kind of like she's backpedaling the leg back in. Right? Kind of pumping and massaging psoas. We're going to do it again, left side. She's going to put her left hand, left thigh together. Same thing, pressing the thigh into the hand. On the exhale again, she's opening up the front of the hip, really allowing the leg weight to be suspended by the muscles that attach onto the inside of the spine. She's going to take a breath in, and on an exhale, I always think of it like a fishing reel. She's kind of winding it back in and returning it home. We're going to try it one more time. Right thigh, right hand together, thighs pressing in. Again, breath comes in. On the exhale, we start to lower down. So exhaling the whole way on down. We're going to pause, and then same thing, she's going to take a breath in, and on an exhale, she's going to press her thigh into her hand, even just a little bit more, yes, and then returning it back home. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to have Kara set her feet back down to the ground.
Oh.
Right, so now try again. So we use a modified tuck and tilt as an assessment. So I'm going to ask Kara to tuck and tilt her pelvis again. So
With my
yeah,
feet
with
to
her
the
feet
floor?
down, yep, and she's going to tuck, and then she's going to tilt. Look at that difference in that range.
Yeah.
Much different tucking. So as psoas sometimes gets locked short because we sit for so many hours in a day, and we lose that ability for it to activate and create neural signaling. And as it does, it can weaken our pelvic floor. So now I'm going to have Kara just do that one more time. Now you can really see this tucking is happening. And when she untucks and she comes through to an active tilt, gorgeous. I mean, there's like inches of difference from where you started. So again, more core control, more activation. Now, I'm going to have Kara lift up her hips. She's going to go ahead and lie back onto her back. And the uniqueness about the core, that core reflex, if you activate the rooting mechanisms through psoas, you actually get that blood flow back into this vital region of our body that again has tons of neural signaling. Ideally, you kind of feel like the low back curve perhaps has almost more of a lift, only the lift feels more like a Japanese footbridge rather than the Golden Gate Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, a very long, tense arch. It's just got more of a low lift. And ideally that mid-rib has a little bit more settlement. What did you get there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything happen in your pelvis or the back of your thighs?
Well, they're sinking down lower for sure. The pelvis is more even to the floor.
I love it. Okay, so evenness, I like this. Again, notice what you feel. Remember those imbalances that we kind of pointed out. And the four most common, again, feeling like all your weight's on your shoulder blades, your mid-back has the lift, you're feeling that big tension in the mid-spine, your tailbone's very pronounced to the ground, or back of thighs are off the floor. Those are definitely going to alter NeuroCore signaling. Again, that neurological sensory motor feedback that channels through our body to keep us stable involuntarily can get faulty. We want to know if that's happening and if we can return it to more balance. Also, left and right, after doing that, you might feel more balance from left to right, so just notice if you have that. Okay, so another move that I want to talk about is called side leg lift. And this was one that I worked on last week with you guys. We're going to see if we can perfect this move. So I'm going to go ahead and have Kara lie on her side. I don't care which side she wants to lie. You pick. You're just going to face that way, whichever side that is. That's your right side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's on her right side, and I'm going to just give her a roller as a pillow. You could be using a pillow. You could just be fully side-lying. Whichever works for you. But this move is a little bit technical, and I'm just going to raise up our camera here so that you guys can kind of get a little bit more of an angle of what we're doing. This might help you guys understand where this movement is coming from. I'm just going to tip this down a little bit. Okay, so first things first, the bottom knee, we like it to be about 90 degrees at the hip, and that's just going to set us up with the pelvis in kind of a neutral position. The top leg, however, top leg is going to come straight out. Okay, so you've got this nice position there. Once you're in this pose, the first thing you want to notice is if you feel like you are lying right on your hip joint, literally on the trochanter, it'll feel bony. If that's what you're feeling, we don't want you to start the set here, right? You don't want to be in an uncomfortable pose. So a couple of things on the setup. The setup is key of neurostrength. First, make sure that you're not lying on your shoulder joint. Maybe reach your bottom arm out a little bit so that you kind of feel more like you're lying on the side of the shoulder rather than the back side of the shoulder rather than on the shoulder joint. Second is if you feel like you're lying on your hip joint, you just want to roll your bottom hip back a little bit. Top hip goes forward, so there's almost like a rolling over, so that now you should feel like you have more weight on your thigh rather than on your hip. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so one of the things that we just practiced was tucking and tilting. So if I have Kara right now go into her tuck and go into her tilt, here I don't have the reference of the floor keeping the ribs quiet. So a couple of things with this rib negotiation. Taking the top hand and putting it out ahead of you and pushing into your hand to almost feel like you're pushing your ribs back. So now if we're focusing on what's staying still, and I have Kara tuck and tilt now, fantastic, really gives more way to the pelvis. Okay, so now tucking and tilting, most people can get. The trouble is the stack. So something that can help a lot of you guys find this is if you put your ankle on a roller, and if I ask Kara to reach her leg away from her and then return it back in, there's a stack. She's stacking the hip and then she's returning, right? So I'm gonna have her do that a few times. Maybe I can even zoom in a little bit for you guys. Let me see you do it, Kara. Stacking, aha, and then returning. Can you see where she's moving from, right? So we're taking this ilia and we're moving it away from her top rib, right? So as she is reaching, I'm even gonna angle this leg back a little bit. Yeah. What you should feel is that your ribs up here are staying in the same spot, but what's moving is the pelvis. Beautiful. One more time. Stacking. So that's the stack, right? So taking that top hip and putting it onto the bottom hip so that we're not here in our side leg lift, because if we close the position, that's going to cause more compression to the SI joint, but more importantly, you're going to get your obliques involved in the action, and that's not what we want. So again, if I ask her to stack her pelvis and maintain that tilt, so the pubic bone is kind of guiding, he's just kind of putting some energy toward her heel, and then again, that top hip, we want it to go forward just a little bit. We want to minimize the tendency to roll back as we lift. So when she's here, she's just going to try to lift her leg up an inch, and she's just going to hold it there. Okay? So now, all you're doing is holding. This is called neurological reintegration. And what we're doing is kind of Jedi mind tricking the brain into thinking of how many muscles can it activate to hold her leg in place. And it'll do a whole bunch of stuff in this position. So once you're here for about 10 seconds, you re-tilt your tail, you re-stack it, and then you re-roll. And this is part of the lower body stability sequence from mouth. And again, all we're gonna do is try to hold that leg up here. Yeah, and there's the range, right? So she's got some activation. Her leg is starting to meander a little bit. It doesn't want to stay still. That's when we know that we've got those stabilizers working. She's just going to do 2 repetitions of a reintegration technique of internally rotating the leg, and then she's going to come back to neutral, and then she's going to try to externally rotate the leg, and then she's going to come back to neutral. She's going to do it one more time. Internally rotating, so the toes go down, and then she comes back to neutral, and then she's going to externally rotate, just a touch, so small. It's not about range, it's about the activation of the onset of the move. So now she's going to internally rotate, she's going to keep it here. So now again, we're thinking again, reset your checkup, tilting, stacking, and rolling forward. So if I invite you guys to energize your leg a little behind you, and now she's going to try to lift her leg up just 1 inch, that's it. She's going to pause. She's going to come back to parallel, she's going to pause. Still checking in with those ribs, right? They're still behind us, right? We're lifting up that leg just 1 inch. Look at how small the range of motion is for these. And then back to parallel and wait. Just going to do it again. Lifting that leg up. Oh, yes, indeed.
My God.
I know. And then back to parallel. Lots of subtle shake. One more time. Lifting up. She's going to pause. She's going to come back to parallel. Now, the pattern. She comes up to where she has it, but now she's going to let that leg lower all the way down. I'm even going to get that roller out of the way. So she's really got to tap the toe. She's going to come all the way up. She's going to come all the way down, all the while checking that that pelvis is still in the tilt, the stack, and the roll. Only the leg is moving right from the joint of the hip. One more time. Lifting. That's it. And we're going to go ahead and bring it all the way down. Okay, so that's going to be our set today. I'm just going to have her bend her knee for a second. Now, if we've done this right, all of the work is happening in the side hip. If you're feeling it down the leg into the iliotibial band, we have another an abductor called TFL. This is our hip's little helper. This one is overactive. We don't want to feel it into the front of the hip or down the leg. If that's what you're feeling, wrong pathway, drop the leg, reset up, do it on the other side, and then come back. Let's flip on over. We're going to have her do it on the other side.
It's okay if my back is there, or you want me to flip
Let's
over it?
maybe, I think actually let's have her face behind. Yes, that way maybe you can see it from the back side. Sometimes this is actually very insightful for people to see it from the side. So same thing, what did we do? We set ourselves up, outreaching the bottom arm, legs at a 90-degree angle on the bottom, top leg is gonna come out. And I always think my ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, everything's on one line. Again, the first thing you wanna notice is, do you feel like you're lying on your hip joint? If that's what you're feeling, we're just gonna roll that hip back a little bit so that we're really stacking one hip right over the other, and we have more weight on the thigh rather than that hip joint, okay? So now, she's got this top hand on the ground. She's pushing it to keep these ribs energized behind her. And again, she's gonna start with her tilting, so the tail goes back. Yeah, so she's maintaining a subtle curve in her back, right? I don't want to flatten the back. I actually want a neutral in this position. She's going to stack, so she's trying to roll that roller away. We're going to have her do that 3 times. She's going to release. And again, the ribs are staying quiet, and it's just from the pelvis, so it's tiny. One more time. She's going to stack. And when she's got that stack, she's gonna hold that, and she's just gonna roll her top hip forward. I always think if my hip bone were a headlight, it's aiming toward the floor, not straight ahead. So once I've got this, again, energizing that leg, she's gonna slowly lift her leg up to parallel. Yeah. So now once we've got it at parallel, again, you wanna hold here for 10 to 15 seconds. This is, again, where the magic starts to happen. Brain's going through a file cabinet. How many muscles can it recruit to hold that leg in place? A lot, in fact. So again, we let the brain do whatever it naturally does, and now we're gonna override it, shut it down. So again, she's keeping her ribs behind her. She's gonna re-tilt her tail. She's gonna try to re-stack with her leg up, and she's gonna re-energize her leg forward. Crazy how much we've just subtly moved and we don't even feel it. So then we're gonna internally rotate the leg. She's gonna come back to neutral. She's gonna externally rotate the leg. She's gonna come back to neutral. No pelvic motion, right? Just the femur, so tiny, 1 inch, back to neutral. And then external. Notice if the leg starts to drift forward. Okay, this time again, she's gonna internally rotate, she's gonna keep it there. She's gonna recheck her tilt, her stack, and her roll. Again, almost as if she's energizing her leg behind her. And then she's gonna try to lift that leg up an inch, and she's gonna stop. And then she's gonna bring the leg back to parallel, and she's gonna stop. Again, she's gonna lift it up. And then she's gonna go back to parallel and stop. A lot of neural inhibition on this side, actually. Go ahead and lift it up. So a lot of faulty patterning, I would say, on this side. And then she's gonna come back to parallel, checking that tilt, stacking, and rolling. And then again, lifting, finding our core, and then back to parallel. Such a small motion. Now again, she's gonna bring the leg up to where she had it, and now she's gonna go ahead and let her foot come all the way on down to the ground. You could just go down to the roller. I'm making her go all the way. She's gonna lift that leg up, 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 up. There it is. And then bring it all of the way down. 2 more times. Look at the pace that she's going, right? So it's a 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. We hold, and then we come down. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000 here. And then 1 more time. Lifting, lifting, lifting. And then bringing it all the way down. Okay, and then again, she's gonna take a break. So, a couple of things on that one. How'd that go on that one? I know, it's tough. Now, here's the really compelling thing. Oftentimes, what we have is muscles that have gotten overactive, right? Like a lot of us are, some of the internal hip rotators like TFL are actually locked very short, which can then inhibit the muscles that we really want to activate. So we would almost think I'm strong on that side. Like I always think my right side is my dominant side, I'm strong there. But a side leg lift, not so much, because there's where my faulty patterns really lie. And that is one of the things that also then inhibits my left hip stability, is that that right hip gets so locked. So those are kind of important concepts. Okay, so hopefully that helps you guys with that strategy. Now, a couple more things. I want to work on the upper body. The first is a move called rib length. This one tends to be very difficult for people. It is a lengthening technique, and we want to make sure that we understand this movement because we can use it as an assessment, kind of like our tucking and tilting, but it can also be a great way to open and restore hydration to the torso. So I'm going to have Kara come back up onto the full roller, and she's going to bring that roller behind her ribs. And I'm going to bring this back down again. And I also want to do a move that, again, Kara has trouble with, but is like one of my absolutely favorite moves. And so we'll see if we can help her with a sideline arm fan. Really incredible what it can do to stabilize. Okay, so first things first, to do a rib length, you want to make sure that your pelvis is in a tuck. So that's going to kind of elongate the pubic bone toward the nose. Bottom of your shoulder blades should be on your side of the roller. So right here, if I actually have Kara bring her arms up in the air and just kind of shimmy her shoulders for a second, bottom of the shoulder blades, I can feel them kind of wiggling around down here. They're not on top of the roller. So she's going to land on her blades when she does this. Hands go behind the head. I always think here that I'm lengthening through my neck. I'm keeping my chin away from my collarbones, but one of the cues that we were using today with my teachers is if you had a juicy peach, you don't want to squash the peach, but you also don't want it to roll away. So you're keeping active here. And I'm going to actually have Kara start by curling her ribs forward. And the first thing I want to notice is where the bottom of the ribs are. And these elbows, we're just going to widen them out a little bit. They don't need to be straight out to the sides. It's almost like the elbows are pointing toward the corners of the room. Once she's here, bottom of the ribs are going to stay still. She's going to take a breath in, and on an exhale, she's going to try to extend her mid-thoracic vertebra. She's going to extend over the roller. Beautiful. And you see, it's not a big range of motion. Same thing with tucking and tilting. Mid-thoracic vertebra, not a ton of range, but she's going to take a breath here. And as she takes a breath in, noticing tension just from inhaling, and as she exhales, she's going to come back up in a flexion. It's going to take another breath in. And on an exhale, again, she's going to go through her rib length. Now, once we're in rib length, she's going to stay here, and what we're going to try is a rib side bend. The pelvis has got to stay still, and she's going to side bend towards me. And she's going to stop here. So if there's rotation or anything going on in the pelvis, check what's staying stable and breathe into the side of the ribs right here. And just notice for tension. And then you're going to come back to the middle. She's going to take a breath in. And on an exhale, same thing. She's going to lengthen through her left side. And again, just kind of noticing, does her pelvis want to come? Does she get a little bit rotated at the pelvis here? Same thing, she's going to breathe into the side of her ribs. Very nice when she inhales, how hollow that gets. And then she's going to exhale, she's going to come back to the middle. So she's going to just do it this time, side bending, just to evaluate how far does she go to the left, how far does she go to the right. Just sort of noticing one more time she's going to do it. Does she go more left or does she go more right? And when we have instability in the shoulder girdle, we can definitely inhibit rib motion. So it's just something to notice. So that's, again, just an easy way to assess our rib torso. Now, she's going to curl herself on up, and the move that we want to work on today is called the Sideline Arm Fan. We're going to see if you guys can perfect this move. So you're going to take your resistant band, you put it down onto the floor, and Kara is going to lie her side hip on the band so that her hips, when she lies onto her side, is going to secure the band in place. And again, she's going to use the roller as a pillow. Okay. So on this one, for sure, we're going to give you guys a little bit of an overhead shot on this one. This is one of my favorite moves, super tricky for most people to do, but it really makes a difference in shoulder stability if you do it correctly. Okay, so here we've got her. All right, so now, first things first, the movement is coming from the glenohumeral joint. It is not coming from the scapula, okay? So the movement here is her elbow is going to be at a 90-degree angle, and the movement is going to be this big, as if her fingers are pointing towards where the ceiling meets the walls, back to parallel. It's just a movement of this joint, and it's so small. What isn't it? It's not a movement here and here. Right, so I'm not going to swing the elbow behind and forward. We're really thinking, and this is sometimes what I call a J pose, like as if she's making a letter J with her arm, so that her shoulder girdle is going to get locked into place, and that scapula is going to stay kind of atop her body, so that we don't want that shoulder to drop back. That's going to be the range that the angle is going to be. So she's got about 1 inch between her hip and her arm. So once you're here, if I ask Kara to just kind of internally rotate, a little bit high, internally rotate her hand, wherever her hand hits, she's going to crumble up the band into a loose handle. And once she's got it, the goal here is to feel like you're pulling up and forward into the band. So it's an upward motion. Once she's got it, we're gonna set this up by punching her arm straight out so that elbow is straight, hand is right in front of her hip bone, and then she's gonna bend her elbow and she is gonna let it float back. So we're gonna do this movement 4 times. What this does is it sort of overrides some of those more superficial muscles of the shoulder. We're just gonna activate and then let them go. She's gonna go 1 more time. She's gonna punch forward, but this time as she comes back, she's not gonna let her elbow hit her body, so she's gonna stay here. So we're pulling up on the band, the arm is sort of hanging here, and again, we're thinking like a J pose, so it's sort of like a scooping. Yeah, and if you feel anything in your neck, if you kind of tip your nose down, it'll definitely help you out.
Where should my head be? Sorry, because
Yeah, I would actually kind of look down a little
Okay.
bit. It's just easier, I think, if we keep our head down. Even if you almost look towards your knees is sometimes a better position. Yeah. So now once we're here, again, we are reintegrating right now. She's
Oh my
holding,
God, yeah.
holding the, and it should just start to burn on fire.
Yeah.
So once we're here, all she's going to do is create slight external rotation, and she's going to pause. And then we're going to come back to neutral, and we're going to pause. Look at how small this range of motion is. Externally rotate, we're going to pause. Back to neutral, she's gonna pause. She's gonna do it 2 more times. Externally rotate. Yeah? So again, elbows not moving at all. Look at how I'm just kind of keeping it in one spot with her. She's gonna externally rotate and pause. And then coming back to neutral and pause. Now a pattern. So she's got it in her shoulder. Now we just wanna go through that range with no pausing to reintegrate and repattern the range. 2, and 1 more time. 1, and now she's gonna let go of the band. And now she's going to go through the bigger range of motion that ideally that shoulder joint has. So going into external, but then into internal, all the way down. Yeah, all the way to external, all the way to internal. 2 more times. External, internal. 1 more time. External and internal. And then she's going to release. So ideally, we get all of the work into the contour of the shoulder. If you're feeling it in your neck, it's the wrong pathway. Your brain is thinking we're inviting a shoulder shrug. Traps are getting involved. It's also showing weakness in the lower traps to stabilize the spine in place. Scapula tends to move. So again, ideally it's in that arm. How do you feel on that one?
I don't know that I would have been able to do it without the assist.
Yeah, and that's I think a lot of people. So let's see it on the other side. So these are the kind of, yeah, actually I'm gonna have you spin around to have your hand over here. So this is one of these moves that our instructors tend to spend gobs of time with their clients to try to acquire these types of movements. Because if she were going to help herself, she could, and she could do it with her own bottom arm. Okay, so now again, setup is important. First, we're not lying on the shoulder, so again, this arm has outreached a little bit so that she's lying more on the back of her shoulder blade, not the side of her shoulder. Again, even though we're not doing anything in the hips, if you feel like you're lying on your hip bone, roll that bottom hip back a little bit, get comfortable in the position. So again, her elbow, where is it? It's not going to be at the side of her hip where she's on the hip bone. Again, it's more like a J pose. So we're looking for the movement to be here. Okay, so that's the angle, a J. Her elbow is kind of radiating out and forward. Okay, so once she's got this, again, if I ask her to just internally and externally rotate, and was this the shoulder that you had slipped one time?
No, left.
It's the left one, okay. 2 more. And 1 more time. So she's going to internally rotate again wherever her fingers touch the band. That's how much band she had the last time. She's going to go ahead and just crumble this bad boy up here. And then again, loose handle, right? So something soft so that she's not squeezing her fist. Again, she's going to pull the band up and she's going to hold here. And again, the elbow is going to remain bent. And again, to set this up, she's going to punch her arm forward and then she's gonna bring her arm all the way back. So again, first we're just going through range, making sure that we're understanding where the setup is, where is my shoulder in space, what muscles am I working here. One more time. She's gonna punch forward, but this time again, as she comes back, her elbow is gonna bend, but it's gonna stay in front of her hip. Now, if I weren't here pulling the band, inviting her to pull, and keeping some weight of her elbow into my finger, bring that elbow into me. Yeah, if she couldn't do this, she could take that bottom hand and she could bring it right here. Yep, and kind of like a knuckle, you know, like a little holder. So she could do it, right? She could hold the arm here so that she can feel the tension of the band, but she can also feel her elbow staying stationary in one spot. And then same thing, we're gonna create the external rotation. She's gonna pause, and she's gonna come back to parallel, and she's gonna pause, keeping that wrist in line, so there's no movement at the wrist, there's no rotation, and then we come back to parallel. 2 more. She's gonna externally rotate. She's gonna come back to parallel. 1 more time. Externally rotate. And back to parallel. Now she's gonna go through the pattern 4 times. Here we go. So she's gonna go ahead and do the rotation, no pausing. 4, 3, yep, 2, and 1 more. 1, and here's the important part, let go of the band, and now go through the range of motion. I would take that bottom hand away now and just see if you can float it. 4, 3, 2, and 1. And she's going to go ahead and release that all the way down. So now after we've done something like that, go ahead and lie on your back. Place the roller right at the base of your skull. And let's have you go through a little bit of base of skull shear. So the first thing I would have you guys do is just turn your head a little left, right. Make sure that you find the base of your skull, feel comfortable with it. And if you've got the roller in the right place, if you tip your nose up just a touch, and the roller is really in the right place, it's not gonna go anywhere. It'll just sort of stay in the same spot. So now I'm gonna have Kara kind of roll herself back onto her side, almost where she just was. So again, she's not lying on her shoulder, and she wants to get this roller right at the base of her skull, behind her ear. She's in a half back pose. Here we could even go full sideline if she wanted to, but even in the half back, she's gonna pin the skin, and she's gonna start to turn her head a little left, a little right. And these are really powerful moves. I actually think for so subtle, here is us pinning the skin against the roller. So it doesn't have to be big, it just needs to be precise. And these are the ones that can make profound changes in your body if you know how to do it correctly. So again, just kind of pinning the skin and turning. And then she's gonna pause. Maybe opening and clamming the leg more, and kind of even changing her gaze and coming a little further back onto the skull, and she can do the same thing. So shearing, if I were to put my hand on Kara's abdomen, shearing isn't rubbing back and forth. That's a glide if you're going over the skin surface. You want to pin the skin against the roller and drag it against the underlying plane. And you can do that with circles, you could do that with head turns. It just is dependent on your body and your super design. Same thing, she's going to pause there for a second. She's going to take a nice breath in and out. And I'm going to have her go ahead and just roll herself on her side. I'm going to come over in front of her, and I'm going to be here. I'm going to do it on this side. Okay, so same thing. We kind of start sort of in what I call my half back pose. So I'm half on my back, half on my side. And I just sort of lean into it so that I feel like I'm kind of pinning the back of my ear. And then same thing, I just create these small circles. Or again, I can create a head turn. So I am on the skull surface. I'm not on my cervical spine, right? And you may feel a little bit of your cervical spine kind of just nuzzling up against the roller. Just be really mindful here. I don't need to be jamming my cervical spine into the roller to make the hydration effect. Again, we're just sort of stimulating the tissue in a subtle way. We're gonna pause, give the tissue a moment to adapt. And then again, just kind of outreach your bottom arm, sort of change your gaze, look a little bit more up to the sky, and you can do the same thing. Small circles, subtle head turns. And anytime I feel my hair, or I hear my hair scratching up against the roller, I know that I could get a little more precise. I could really pin the skin a little bit more on the roller and move a little bit more slowly. So I am actively participating in maintaining a subtle bit of compression with my head weight. And then same thing, I'm just going to pause there. Nice breath in and out. So now come back into your flat back pose. I'm going to spin around with Kara on this one. Okay, so same thing. I've got the roller at the center of the base of my skull. And what I like to do is actually hold the roller, then I kind of pick up my head and the roller, and I really line the base of my skull up so that I'm really looking straight up. My neck is open. I'm not hyperextended or hyperflexed. And again, in the center of the base of my skull, I can just rest my arms down and I can create those subtle figure 8 motions. I always think of this as being like a backstroke with my ears. Like I've got Dumbo ears and I'm using my ears as a swimming device. I could make a front stroke. I could kind of change the direction. I could even just stay in one small area and just create a couple of head turns. And then same thing, I'm just going to pause here for a moment. Nice breath in and out. So now a release, a neck decompress. I put my hands onto the roller. I bring the roller a little more to the center of the back of my head. And on this one for sure, you want to feel like you're looking straight up at the sky, gently pressing the center of the back of your head atop the roller. So it's like a bowling ball being balanced on an unstable surface. So now if I take a breath in, and on my exhale, think of that peach. I'm going to nod my nose down without squashing that juicy peach. I'm lengthening through the back of my neck and the inside of my throat. And then I'm going to take a breath in. And on an exhale, I'm just going to slightly tip my chin back up. I'm going to take a breath in. And again, on the exhale, so subtle here. I always think of this as a face nod more than a head nod. So look at me, I'm not dropping my chin down here, right? And then extending it up. It's just small. Nodding, lengthening through, taking a breath in, exhaling and lifting the chin. Let's do that one more time. Exhale, nod down. And then taking a breath in. And then exhaling and tipping the chin back up. Okay, so get rid of the roller, lie flat on your back, palms up, arms and legs extended one more time. And just tune into your masses and spaces one more time. And remember what we started out saying. Hey, if you feel like your head feels off-centered, maybe you're noticing that one arm has more weight than the other. Maybe you notice that all of your back weight was on your shoulder blades. Notice if now your head feels more centered, if the arms are more relaxed, and if you actually feel more mid-ribs and mid-spine, so more weight down the channel between the shoulder blades and below the shoulder blades. Notice if you've got more of that resting spot. How did it feel? Your shoulders look completely different.
Completely,
You
yeah.
started
I
to
feel completely.
really see the difference. And then the arch of the back, if you felt like you had that high tensional lift, notice if the back just feels more relaxed, if it feels like it's off, it's a space, right? But it's an open space, not a tense, lifted space. Notice if the butt cheeks have settled to the ground. When we activate the deep stabilizers of the hip, oftentimes if we've really performed that correctly, I always say it's kind of like I have fluffy butt cheeks. I feel like my
Absolutely.
a little spread out, right? And then the back of thigh masses ideally settle to the floor. And then finally, dividing ourselves into a left and a right half. If we've really helped our autopilot reclaim its connection to the center of gravity, left to right, ideally you're feeling more centered. It's a really beautiful sensation to feel. So notice if you've got that. How do you feel on that one?
So good.
Yeah. So go ahead and roll yourself on your side. Come on up. And let's take the last 5 minutes today and see if any of you guys have any questions. Kara, do you have any questions after that? So many questions.
So many questions.
I want to question my own moral compass now. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and just leave it, put it into the chat. And let's just spend the last couple of minutes.
Why aren't we doing it every night?
Exactly. Why don't we do it all the time? You know, I have to tell you, I took a yoga class not too long ago, and I swear I thought, my gosh, I think I tore my labrum of my hip. Just really felt horrible, and I just thought, I'm just going to do neurostrength every day and reestablish stability. And it was like night and day. In the course of a week, I really felt how much more stable my hip felt. And even if I did have a labral tear, hopefully not putting tension to that region, but stabilizing it can help. So the mini train says, my thighs never feel like they touch the floor. What can I do? Nothing. Here's the thing. It's not about the masses feeling to the floor as long as they feel more relaxed. But I'll tell you something. We did today tuck and tilt challenge and core challenge. The ones that will also help you now is if you add a move called drawbridge and hip side bend, and those are all on Melt on Demand. And listen, if you guys haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel for me, please. But also, again, Melt on Demand, we've just picked out a couple of really cherry moves that are just so critical. If you can master them, they can really transform so much about your own stability. But if you now add these techniques and actually do a lower body length and low back release sequence, or you do one of the neurostrength treatments where you're really adding these moves to something like that, you could make more changes. But for me, core challenge added with a move called the advanced core challenge, the drawbridge, and the hip side bend, those are the ones that will leave my legs down on the ground, and those are all on Melt on Demand. Those are in many of my melt maps, and more to come this month and next in that particular concept. Anybody else have any questions? Let me see if there's anything that came up that I did not see before. Thank you guys all for coming to these. I hope that these become helpful for you as just another way to tap into this. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. Oh, I get a lot of improvement from doing the hand and foot treatments, but every day when I reassess, same imbalances come back every day. That's just it, guys. Remember, daily living causes neurofascial imbalances. It's just a part of life. And so what I'm saying is your body's natural ability to return to balance, you may have not been in balance forever, really, right? There's all sorts of issues that happen from daily living that will alter our NeuroCore efficiency, our nervous system's connection to our center of gravity. Sitting for long periods of time, trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, anything can happen that can alter the fine balance. So again, this is just information for you. So if you say, hey, I notice these common imbalances and I do my hands and feet, I feel myself return to center, but then the next day I come back and they're back again. It happens over time. I used to always have two common imbalances. I used to always feel like I had a huge wailing arch in my mid-back and the back of my thighs would never touch the ground. And now, because of many years of doing this, I feel like the back of my thighs are on the floor most of the time when I start, and for sure the arch of my back is significantly less extreme from day to day. And if I run or I do too much athletics, it comes right back. I know what my melt map is to return myself back to balance. And that's really the trick of melt, is that there are hundreds of melt maps that you can practice. There isn't one melt map for back pain or one melt map to get the back of your legs to the ground, which isn't really the intent of anything, right? We're just trying to help the nervous system reclaim its connection to our center of gravity, improve efficiency, decrease accumulative stress that exists in our body, that if we knew how to actively participate in alleviating it, it wouldn't accumulate and ultimately cause hip instability, hip joint issues, hip replacements, knee replacements, etc. So we want to maintain our joints. I always say, you never hear of people getting a hamstring replacement as they get older, but you certainly hear about people getting hip and knee replacements. I saw somebody else ask, Violet says, I have bone-on-bone arthritis on one side. Are these moves okay for me to strengthen my hips? Violet, 100%. And here's another thing. If you know you actually have damage where there's issues, remember, what is arthritis? Arthritis is inflammation in a joint. That's what arthritis is, inflammation. So if you feel like one side is really your troublemaker, there's a trick of this, and you might want to reach out to a melt instructor about it. You could go to meltmethod.com and click on find an instructor, and they could probably walk you through this, but I call it my 2-for-1. If I had a known hip instability on one side, I would do a side leg lift and try to activate the deep stabilizers on the trouble side. And then I would go to the side that I feel like I can execute the movement on and it feels okay. And then in my mind, I will tell my brain, okay, we're gonna go back over to the other side and I want it to feel exactly how it did on this side. And you'll find the second set that you do on the weak side, you'll actually neurologically reintegrate those deep stabilizers a little faster, and you'll really feel it burn exactly where we want you to feel it. And that's when you know that you're making the changes. And then after a while, you can just do it on each side, right? So we're asymmetrical bodies. We're not perfectly symmetrical. Our bodies do have mishaps from right shoulder to left hip and things of that nature. So figuring out which moves to do is really just, when you're doing it on your own, a little bit of trial and error. I would try different melt maps. For those of you who have any type of pelvic issues, on Melt on Demand, I have an entire collection for pelvic instability, so hopefully that will help you out as well. And I like that, Keegan, you know, yeah, the labrum repair surgery, hold that off as best as you can. Lots of different strategies for that. Maybe I'll go on Instagram and teach you a couple of really great techniques for those sorts of things. Let me just see if there's anything else. Yes, if you have bursitis, Eileen, definitely. You know, one of the things is if you feel like it's an acute pain when you have bursitis, you may want to do things like front thigh gliding and shearing. A couple of weeks ago, I did a melt map that had that one in it on YouTube Live. So if you don't have Melt on Demand, look at some of the lives, and I teach everybody how to do the front thigh gliding and shearing. You have bursitis, front thigh gliding and shearing is super important for you. I always chuckle when I mention doing bare skin melting in the winter. I am enjoying the Florida weather, Diane, but I have to tell you, way back when, my husband used to love my naked melting, and it's always fun to be barely wearing clothing and melting while movie night, right? So instead of sitting on your couch, maybe do a little bit on the floor instead of being there. I saw one other person saying, hey, I felt a little bit nauseous. Remember, if we have issues in the NeuroCore, you are tapping. I get a bit nauseous doing it on my injured side, right? So Joanne's saying, hey, I'm doing it on my injured side. It's creating a reflexive reaction, right? Our body is designed to support, protect, and stabilize us. So as we go and tinker with the stabilization components of our autonomic system, it can trigger a stress response, which makes you feel a little bit nauseous. But that's kind of when you know that your body really needs your help, as you start to activate those tiny subtle movements. If that's really triggering something in you, there's something there for you to work on. So just kid gloves, go slow, right? And just keep asking your body to, you know, be a participant in your self-care. Give yourself permission to go into your body and sense what you feel, and keep doing it. You'll see, and it makes changes over time, right? We're not looking for perfection. We're just continuing a practice to help improve our body. I hope that helps you guys today. Kara, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Absolutely.
You did great on that shoulder stability stuff
Yeah,
actually today.
yeah, we got to do that 3 times a week.
All right.
You know.
I have a mission. So yeah, and again, you guys are asking how often can we do these? I usually say with NeuroStrength, I always flip maps. So I would do NeuroStrength like one technique every day. But you know, if you have a hip issue, if you did it twice a week or every 2 days, so if I did it on a Monday, I might do it on Thursday, I might do it on Saturday, right? And so you just kind of keep get in, get out. It's only 4 repetitions, 1 set, piece of cake. That's all.
Huge differences.
Yeah, yeah, it's really can be transformative. Make sure that you're sipping water now. Eat some water-filled foods tonight. Be good to your body. Thank your body. Say thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of everything that it does. I'm appreciative of you guys. Very grateful. Wishing you guys all a happy Valentine's Day. Sending lots of love to everybody. Reach out to somebody for sure this week, maybe once a day for the next week, and put some positive energy out into the world. Elevates the frequency of the whole universe. Happy melting. See you later.